You're listening to Eyes on the Ground. I'm Slade Ham, comedian, writer, explorer. I'll be your host. Michael Duff is multi-talented. As a musician, he's released several albums, both as a solo artist and as the frontman for bands like the 90s rock outfit Chalk Farm. He now runs Duff Web, a full-service marketing agency that specializes in creatively marrying effective websites with explosive promotion. There's a lot to consider when you make the transition from mere artist to functional professional entity. What's the difference between you and the people who are living the life you're trying to? My guess is that they've all addressed the things we'll get to in this episode. Sure, we talk amongst ourselves about how you got to take yourself seriously, man. We're businesses, man. But what does any of that mean? We'll talk about some of the practical things we can do to start treating ourselves as the proper businesses we should be, as well as strategies for building and maintaining our audience. First, though, I want to chat with Michael Duff about some of the things that artists consistently do wrong.
There's two things, and it's not just artists and musicians. It's actually people who have a passion for something. And the first thing is perseverance. They literally just don't stick with it long enough. As you were saying, artists specifically, and I'm absolutely, I can give you a list of all of the companies I have right now and, all these things that I want to do. And it's still, that's the creative mind, and it's awesome. And that should never be attempted to change. I think that's what makes an artist amazing. But there is a certain point where you need to find something and push through. What if you had just this comedy thing? I don't know. I've done a couple of shows and I feel like painting now, and it probably came in your head, but you're like, yeah, but I need to stick this. I need to keep going with this, and that's the biggest problem that I think most artists have. But it's like I said, it's not just artists. It's a lot of entrepreneurs who aren't like singers or painters or whatever. They're still artists. It's just it gets transformed in a different way. And then it's really promotion. It's just that. It's just getting enough people to hear what it is that you're doing. The most tragic thing, and I can't even count the number of brilliant musicians that I've known along the way who just had that for some reason. They bought into that. Oh, I'm just going to sit in my room and I'll just be the best, whatever, that you've never heard. And it kills me, but it's like, okay, they're working at Walmart at night and playing all day. And that's just what they do. It's that old cliche of the guy in the gold mine who stopped 3 feet from the gold vein and then sold the mine. It literally happens all the time.
Well, the two things that I want to ask there, that's sort of been a recurring, it pops up in successful people who go, well, the one thing I do that other people don't do is I stick with it. One, how do you keep your mindset stable through that part? And two, how do you know when to let that go? Because not every idea is good. Yeah,
that's true. And I really think it just depends on how it makes you feel. Because you could literally just do something that you love and nobody else loves, but who cares? It makes you happy. Then what's the difference? If you're hell bent on it being a career and making you a living, that's where you need to, just take a step back and say, okay, so what's the viability of this? If it's something that makes you happy and it may or may not end up being a viable career, that's kind of okay.
You can fill your house full of your dumb paintings of birds if that's your thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So once you have a thing, say you found your for me, stand-up comedy. This is the thing I do. I do a lot of other things, but stand-up seems to be the one I'm best at. What do I need to have together? What should I be like? How do I corral all this stuff that's up here into something that we could do something with?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is you actually do. You made a great newsletter on this, in fact, of of doing many things as opposed to like the book that I'm stuck on. I read that news and I was like, gosh, I got to get back to this thing and finish it and then just be done and then do another one, whatever, having that kind of productivity, that is something that you need to have. No matter what you do, you need to have kind of a fair amount of it. If you have one song, that's not going to be viable. There's the theory of the overnight success. And I mean, every single, the Beatles, the overnight success who had been at it for 8 years before that, playing like hours every night, sometimes 2 clubs a night. And then they finally got their big break. And that's I think a lot of artists like, well, once I get my break, countless musicians have talked to me, man, once I get signed, everything will be all right. And I'm like, no, it won't. Because that's just the start.
And you don't have the toolkit now.
Exactly. That's the step 0. So from there, then things really have to really be worked. But that idea of the overnight success, I mean, I actually look at that with I do this every Monday night. I do a live Facebook. It's called Man Mondays. And because this book that I'm writing for an eternity is a relationship book. So it's based on, it's 4 guys. So if I was going to take that and say, okay, now it's time to make that viable. None of the things that I would tell you I have done, because it's just this little side thing that makes me happy and I love to do it. And that's the difference. That's not where I'm looking to have viability. But if I wanted to, I do have content now. So I could, there are tons of things that we live in an unbelievable time for an artist because of all the tools that we have that are free.
Yeah, my God.
It's ridiculous.
So I started comedy in 2000. I know you were doing music in the 90s. None of us had these tools at our disposal. I can't imagine having a pipeline into the entire world and letting it sit idle.
But I think people don't look at it, and this is where this conversation started. Actually having an artist looking at what they do as a business. Right. And not having, they have these tools, but in our day we had the mail, we had phones, we had ads in magazines, and a lot of people didn't use those. But that's all we had. So it's really a matter of the mindset and that shift of like, okay, what I'm doing, I want to do as a business. I want to make money doing this, and I want whatever, I want to be on the cover of whatever version of Rolling Stone ends up being there, Right. If that's your goal, great. Then really you need to start working backwards. But a lot of people like, oh, I'm going to be a star one day. And then they sit and play video games. Yeah. So it's like, okay, well then if you want to be a star playing video games, that's what you should be doing. And that's not, there's no harm in that either. But some guys, that's all they want to do. And that's, they're making enough to do what they want to do. And that's genius. It's sort of just, I think it just depends on what you want. Right. And what you, how honest you are with yourself and what your expectations are and what you, that's what I just said strikes me as funny because it's not always being honest with yourself, because a lot of times your view of yourself is given to you by other people. Of course. Like literally, like that old producer who said that I wasn't going to be singing. And this was somebody who was in the music industry. Right. That has nothing to do with my sister who had that conversation with me one day, or my dad. Those things are the most close to us. So if I had listened to them in that way and been honest about, being honest, like they want me to be honest, I wouldn't have done anything that I've done.
Hopefully you've already found your viable medium, because where this goes next counts on having content, and plenty of it. I don't want to make it sound like numbers in a spreadsheet, because I think we can all agree that's not the case. But if you're going to do what you love without that side job, or without living at your parents', or without existing in absolute squalor, at some point you're going to have to figure out how to get $1 out of a consumer's pocket and into yours. It's not just making cool stuff and putting it on a shelf. It's a process, and it remains one even after someone is already on board. Duff alludes to this slope more than once. And here we'll take a deeper dive into how to engender that relationship between artist and future fan, and how to nurture it in the digital realm. As you'll hear him mention, you can't just beat them over the head with you. You have to build and maintain something that they can feel a part of.
This is actually the way that I do it with almost any client, no matter what they do, is I look at who's doing it well now. In fact, we talked about this when you and I first started talking about business stuff for you. It's like, who's killing it in your area right now? And then just look at what they're doing. It's kind of a simple formula, but it really is. It's why reinvent the wheel? Like, if somebody is out there, and you will find patterns depending on industries. There are, we have a couple of skincare clients, and it's all about Instagram, fashion, skincare, all that stuff. It's all about Instagram. Depending on the demographic, Pinterest is huge.
Right.
It's got a huge female population. But then you have like actors and musicians. TikTok is getting amazingly hot. And it's one of the reasons is because it's such a new platform. Mm-hmm. And this is talked about a lot. I know a lot of these online, Gary Vee and a whole bunch of guys will talk about the land grab of a new platform.
Right.
And there's opportunities for everyone. There was, TikTok is the newest one that people are just starting to. It's like the Snapchat now.
Snapchat. There was when Vine had first come out. MySpace always resonates with me because it was the first real platform of this sort. That was my space. That was
all we had.
I had a great following, and it was the comment culture was wonderful. Everything was just I didn't know how to pivot it into, bodies in seats yet. I was still really young at comedy, but it disappeared. And I remember Tim, my buddy, he goes, dude, never build your house on rented land.
Yeah. And that brings me to the number one point that any artist, really any business, any seminar I give on marketing, the first thing I say is get emails. Get email addresses. That is and should be the most important thing you have on your mind.
That's what I'm learning.
How can I get more email addresses? And that is the rented land thing. If you have an email address, that's gold. Yeah.
Does that then transfer over to a need? And again, another thing I'm struggling with in a modern environment where everything is very social media driven. But your own website in that instance, like sort of if you're building an image, does it start with a website? Does it start with a social media platform? If you were taking me and building my online presence, what's it look like?
Yeah, it always starts with a website. And the reason being is it's not rented land. You're controlling the narrative. And that's the second most important thing. The first thing is getting people to that. Mm-hmm. And you do that by social media. You do that by getting their email addresses. Email, by the way, is still the most effective promotional venue there is.
It's as direct as you can possibly be.
Yeah, regardless of the spam and all that, it's still the most effective. Facebook Messenger was looking like it was going to be amazing, and it's still good, but it's still on the fence. But still, email is it's solid. It's always going to be there. Well, and people are always going to have email,
and you can find them. That is that was really crippling for me when MySpace just sort of, you're like, you can't. I was watching it fade away like something out of Infinity War. And you're
right.
Don't go.
Yeah. Now, literally, and then now what? One of the things that is, if as far as just a design convention, I'm going to geek out a little bit design wise, but on a website, a few years ago, you had. You would always see at the top of a website their social media links.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you notice now, the big ones don't have it up at the top. They'll be at the footer, if at all. And the main reason is because once somebody goes to social media, they're off, man. They're on to the cat videos. They're on to, whatever the play of the day is, mm-hmm. and you won't get them back.
You're inviting him into a room with you and 1,000 other people and trying to have a private conversation. And
Exactly.
that's just,
Yeah.
but on social, how do you avoid the chase? Like, I guess that really is that just it? Is that the gamble where you go, all right, I'm hoping that Twitter is going to be worth my time and effort. Oh, there's a new platform. Now I got to I got to start thinking in TikTok 10-second.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest mistakes that are made, and this is, artists, businesses, probably more businesses, is they forget that it's a social media. It's social.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to be interacting. If you do a lot of blah, 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 and that's it, then it sort of becomes a little hollow after a little while. People, the interaction is really important. I mean, it's you standing after your show, talking to a bunch of people who came to see you perform. It's the same exact thing, but you're only doing it, a line or two at a time. It really makes a big difference. It's a connection. And that's, at the end of the day, especially with all this stuff, all of the electronic, everybody's sitting on the phone. We still all want to connect. That's why everybody's doing this.
Right.
Because they want to connect with more people.
The interactive part for me, some people are those sorts of attention whores that'll come on that, man, I appreciate your money. I appreciate your input. I appreciate you coming to the shows. Oh my God. How do I navigate these waters? Can you hire someone to handle your social?
You absolutely can. And at a certain point, it's the smart move, but you just have to make sure that they know your voice and they will respond in kind. Most of my bigger clients have somebody dedicated to that.
Like the Wendy's Twitter person.
Yeah. And you because it's so important, all of these big companies have somebody that does that.
Right.
Or they wouldn't. If it wasn't important, they wouldn't. But as far as that, though, as far as that point that you just made, if you're looking at it from like one of my skincare clients, we actually have automation that caters to that 5% differently. They get different content. They get more access in that way because they are more valuable in the long term. So if you look at that, what you were saying is there's a theory called the 80-20 rule. You're going to get 80% of your profits, your returns from 20% of your actions and your public. So you'll find that you break it down and it's a ridiculous paradigm that is just too consistent to ignore. It may not be exactly 80-20, but it's damn close in most instances. And the idea is that if you really concentrate on that 20% that's making that 80%, you can widen it and actually increase at a much more efficient rate. So if you, like taking the example, yes, it can be taxing, but that's exactly where you should be concentrating in more and like chasing them up every once in a while. And they'd be like, oh,
because they're the loud ones. They're the ones that share. They're the ones that talk. They're the ones that spend. Right. Ultimately, if you had 100% of those people,
but you won't. That's why 80-20 was discovered.
I don't want to interrupt the flow too much here, but as simple as that last part sounds, I've found it's the easiest to neglect. The amount of data I capture at live events is, at the time of this recording, embarrassing. Hopefully you can see what we're building here. I have some questions about all of the technical jibber jabber that always goes over my head, like SEO, ClickFunnels, and remarketing. Which ones should we be focused on?
If I were to distill what the most effective thing that most businesses don't do, it is that word you use called remarketing. And here's how I do it. When I give marketing surveys, one of the first things I say is, all right, so who here would walk into a bar and walk up to somebody that they never met and ask them to marry him? And nobody does. And I say, why do you do that with your marketing? And then I get peculiar looks and I'm like, listen, if you send an ad and somebody doesn't know who you are, how do you expect them to buy something? You're asking them to buy something. What
Right.
you want to do is you want to walk up and say hi, maybe buy them a drink, talk to them a little bit. It's called maturing the relationship. This phrase called remarketing, I'll just look at it from Facebook because it's the most effective place to start your marketing campaigns always, because the targeting is brilliant. So what you do is you put ads out to, I'm going to geek a little bit, but try not to get too bad. From artists, anybody should be looking at their world this way. There are 3 types of people. There are people who don't know who you are, and that's called cold traffic. These are people who've never heard of you. Some of them may not even know what you do is going to benefit them. That's cold.
Fair.
They're as cold as you get. They're like the cold calls, the guys who call you up, do you have insurance, whatever. Then there's warm traffic. These are people who may have heard of you, or definitely know of what it is that you sell that can benefit them. That's warm traffic. They're a little easier to talk to. Mm-hmm. Then there's the hot traffic. These are the guys who know you, who have seen you, or are familiar enough, and a friend of theirs has your product, something like that. That's hot.
Gotcha.
So if you look at the landscape, 95% of the population, 98% are cold. And that is what most people are trying to pitch to, because they're the biggest. If it's an artist, their hot traffic is their immediate friends and their family. Warm traffic are the people that they have their day job with, and whatever, their church or people they went to school with. That's warm traffic. Basically, then there's 7 billion people who don't know who they are. And that's the cold traffic. So using a company as an example, they'll send an ad out. Here's my Ginsu knife. It's amazing. Buy it today for $19.95. And people just look at it and just scan right over, because they don't. It's cold. It's not interesting to them.
Just part of that white noise that's scrolling already.
But what if you put an ad that was a little bit of value? Did you know that if you use the wrong knife, you're actually wasting food and money? Like, what? That's fascinating. So suddenly there's something interesting and valuable. Click this link. Now, the technological aspect of it is there's a tracking code. They're called pixels, if you've heard that word. So if I have a link on that interesting ad, and that sends them back to my website, Facebook knows that. They know that they went to my website from that ad. And now those people are now warm. So now I send them a different message.
And you can market just to those people.
Absolutely.
Who have visited your site from an ad.
You should, yeah. Now they're warm, and they get a different message. And it's like, okay, now they've seen the Ginsu because they went to your site, and now you can, you bought them a drink. Now you may ask them on a date. You can target, like on Facebook, if you clicked a Peloton ad and I sell gym equipment, I can actually target people who have liked the Peloton page. So if you've liked the Peloton page, then I can feed you ads. If I'm smart, it'll be something of value, because I'll be cold traffic at that point. And then, wow, that's interesting. Then you go to my site. Now I can start to mature the relationship, which is, again, it's all about like this personal contact thing. It's always that way. Now, I will say that if you asked 100 people if they would walk into a bar and ask somebody to marry them 100 times, probably one person will say yes. And that's the average internet conversion is 1%.
So I'm thinking of all of the instant applications for this as a stand-up comic, or as a podcaster, or as a content provider.
Okay, I'm going to jump in on that.
Yeah.
Right, what you said there. So actionable items for artists. Mm-hmm. You do a stand-up, right? You hire somebody literally to walk around and get every single person's email address that is in that club. Pay them $25 for the hour, whatever it is. It's pay them $100. It is going to be worth every penny. because after the show, you send them a thank you email for being at that show. And then you can start to ask some questions. Was there anything that you really liked? How was the club? You can just start to have a conversation, and suddenly they're like, wow, this guy's actually interested in me. You know, you're starting to mature the relationship. This is exactly the same play of what I just talked about on Facebook.
The where doesn't matter. In person, via email, on social media. The technique is the same if we want to get our product or us in front of people in a meaningful way, and not one in which we remain buskers yelling at uninterested strangers on the street. And when you zoom out a little bit and look at it from this perspective, it seems uncomfortably obvious. Find something you enjoy, do it often, begin to build a body of work, and then use this huge world of digital tools and proven approaches to purposefully introduce yourself to an audience. Give them something of value for being part of the world you're creating. Yeah, it's that simple. Let's get right back into it.
ClickFunnels is a platform that was built to sell stuff. Okay. And the what's great about ClickFunnels is you've all seen a site that is built in ClickFunnels. You just don't know it because it's just a building platform. It's another platform that you can build a website in. However, this is built to upsell you. And it's this is another piece of gold that all artists should know, and it's called the upsell. And if you're selling something, say you're selling your book. Mm-hmm. If somebody buys the book, you immediately should offer them some other thing. Immediately. Because that is the most likely time that they're going to buy something else.
Right, because they're currently buying something from you.
Because they're in the buying mood. They literally are in that motion. And every time that you've bought a car, you're going to be offered insurance and the coverage packages, because that's when people are buying. They're actually literally, their defenses are down, their endorphins are up. It's like they're happy and they're into a buying mood. So that's the time to offer them the upsell. ClickFunnels is built around direct marketing theory, which is junk mail.
Right.
Literally, it's one of the best sales methods ever, because it's been around forever. It's been honed. And that's one of the things is the upsell. It's like you call for this free report, which is basically a sales pitch.
Of course.
And then you call for that $19.95 Ginsu, and if you're on the phone with those people, you will get 5 or 6 different options to buy other stuff. Oh, buy another set for only $6.95 shipping and handling. Oh, right. Do you want to buy this survival knife? Whatever it is, you're going to be offered a number of other things that increase the average cart value. And that is a term that everybody watching this should learn and have right next to get an email address, increase the average cart value.
Well, I mean, the amount of people you need to get to a certain dollar amount just shrinks the more you get them to put in that shopping cart.
But it's a percentage as well, though. It's a percentage of when somebody buys something, you offer them something more, or you can actually just offer them something of a much bigger value instead of what they bought. Like, you're looking for this book, but if you wanted to get the book and an album and a T-shirt, we'll do the whole thing for 50% off of what it would be. They're like, oh yeah, I'll do that. And you've increased the average cart value. Your cost is a little more, of course, but you're selling more stuff. They're more invested now. And it's, that is actually a way to quickly mature the relationship.
When you are an artist on the way up, an artist listening to this right now goes, okay, cool. This is starting to make sense. I'm starting to see, I got some ideas. It's percolating. There are companies that specialize in this sort of marketing strategy. How much of this is so specialized that I have to hire to do it? And how much of this is something that I can put sweat equity into and go, you know what, I'm willing to give myself a 50-hour-a-week job?
I've had friends, ask me, hey, listen, Duff, I need a site. What is it going to cost for you to do it? I'm like, well, this is what it would cost me to do it for you. And they're like, wow, I don't have that. I'm like, okay, good. So do you have time? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, for us to do a site correctly, between 100 and 200 hours. So if it's simple, it could be 80 hours. You know, it's doable if you have the time to put into it. But I will say that the landscape changes quickly, and there's information that comes in every day. And if you are interested in doing something as a business, you need to look at it as a business. And every day, I literally spend probably still 2 to 3 hours a day learning stuff. And it's just, you know, it is just because things change. And of course, I'm in charge of a whole bunch of people. I have to actually know what they're doing. So it's a little different for me, but I like it enough that it's interesting to me, and it gives me ideas of like, oh wow, that's fascinating. That if you can do that, then you can probably do this too. But if you do have the time and the inclination, just start subscribing to stuff. You know, these terms that you said, SEO, search engine optimization. It's how you craft your website so that certain keywords come up and that you come up higher on a list. But I'll tell you what, SEO to me is one of the last things you should do. I liken it to like making sure your house is super clean
before you put it on sale.
When somebody comes over, they'll really like it, or it makes the listing nicer or whatever. But it is important at a certain point. But you can drive traffic earlier on, like you're saying, somebody starting out. You know, first you build your site. You take the time, you build your site. You go. There's tons of platforms. If you can't afford a firm to do it, there's just so many. Squarespace has some really nice looking ones. If you're an actor, I actually was partners with a site years ago called myactingsite.com. It's built for actors. It's super easy. It's like those kinds of things you can do on your own. And then as you have that, of course, all this time, as we talked very early on, you need to be building content.
It's about as linear of a recipe as they come, and it's 1,000 times more effective than the lay and pray approach taken by almost all of our peers. Again, this doesn't just happen. There's a lot of collating, a lot of editing, a lot of actually finishing some of the half-forgotten projects we keep promising to get around to. But obviously those things are important, right? Otherwise, what are we even asking people to become a fan of? Parting words from Michael Duff for the up-and-coming artist?
I think if you are artistically inclined, you are needed more nowadays than you have ever been needed. So whatever it is you're doing, on whatever scale you're doing, please continue to do it and use all of these methods that we talked about to continue to do it. Because there's, art is really what makes this whole thing work.
If you're considering launching or relaunching yourself digitally, be prepared to do some patient work. This is one of the areas that I strongly suggest you bring a professional in to help with. Regardless of how you go about it, though, go about it you must. Start building the body of work and decide on a methodical approach to getting it out there. And even if you start out doing it yourself, it's worth dedicating a separate piggy bank so you can invest in doing it correctly as soon as possible. After all, why else are we doing this if not to reach the biggest audience possible? And how cool is it if the audience we think we can reach right now is much, much larger than we originally thought? For more on Michael Duff, as well as answers to all of your questions about web design and marketing, visit duffweb.com. Eyes on the Ground is produced by me, Slade Ham. Additional production and music provided by Brian Carrion. To support future projects like this, please consider contributing to my Patreon or subscribing to me on all things social media at Slade Ham. SLADEHAM.